Exercise 1.17, 1.17 in your workbook, Keys to Teaching Grammar to English Language Learners. This topic is about a group of students that is generally referred to as Generation 1.5 or Gen 1.5. These are students who are somewhere in the middle between being a native speaker and being an ESL student. In my experience, these students are fluent. They sound fluent. They will say things like, out of the blue, it start to rain. But you see, they'll use out of the blue and other idioms without even thinking, and their pronunciation is really good. They'll say readin' and gonna and don't ya. They sound just like a native speaker, but they're leaving off endings a lot. It's not just that, but when you actually see their writing, you're shocked because the same person that sounded so fluent to you suddenly is writing things like it was begin to rain, not it was beginning, or the accident happened at 7 o'clock with no ed, no s, nothing. And that's just not a normal kind of mistake. It's not quite what an ESL student would do, because an ESL student would make those errors, but that ESL student would never say don't ya and gonna and wanna and all of those kinds of things that sound like native speaker English, right? So they're somewhere in the middle. And one reason that they're like this is that we often refer to this group as ear learners. If you think about all learners as being eye learners, an eye learner for us is somebody usually it's not somebody who's good at taking notes or noticing things. An eye learner is what we generally call a person who had the luxury of sitting in a language class where there was a teacher at a whiteboard showing the student language, showing the student grammar and vocabulary. In other words, teaching language specifically to the person. An ear learner, on the other hand, is a person who sort of just picked up English. They were, their ears, they were surrounded by English, they heard it, and after a while, they picked it up. So this is not an ESL student who was here for 8 weeks and then went back to Brazil. No, this is a person who lives in the United States or some English-speaking country, and they're exposed to English, but a lot of it. And as a result, they pick up English. But since nobody is pointing out that the ED in the word kissed is not kissed, but it's kissed, they have problems with these things. When they hear the word kissed, they might write KIST because that's what they hear. They don't make the connection between the ED of kissed and laughed and clapped as being an ED that can sound like a T, right? So these are ear learners. I also think sometimes that when we have ESL kids in 4th and 5th and 6th grade who are getting pretty fluent at that point, if they got here around kindergarten, they're pretty fluent by 6th grade. When you meet their parents often have had no English instruction, meaning they were never eye learners, but they are working in a factory. They're working someplace where they're surrounded by English, and as a result, they've picked up English. No one ever pointed out that an expression such as all of a sudden, they may think that all of a sudden is one word because no one has ever pointed out that this is actually all plus of plus a plus sudden. Well, in your workbook, it's pages 15 and 16. It's exercise 1.17. I'm not going to go over any of the exercise with you right now. I just would like you to please go look at page 16 yourself and try to catch the kind of mistakes that you see the student making. And what I will tell you is, if you heard this same student speaking, and this student actually, I don't want to say read this out loud, but if they said it, you wouldn't catch half of the things on the page because their English is so fast and so native-like, at least it sounds that way, but it is filled with errors. Serious errors that when this person applies to go to college and they try to write an essay, their entry essay, or they try to function in a college classroom that requires writing, not just multiple choice, this student is not going to make it, although they sound 100% fluent. Also, what could happen is somebody, when they see the writing, they might think, oh, this guy might be dyslexic or something like that. It's not a handicap. It's not a problem of that kind of nature. It's not pathology. It is Gen 1.5. It's exactly what it is. Now, Gen 1.5 impacts a lot of ESL kids, what I would consider ESL, but they're not because they don't want to be ESL. They don't sound ESL. They're not like the ESL people who can't speak much English at all. They're fluent. It's just wrong. A lot of it's wrong. And it's not the kind of grammar mistakes that a native speaker would make. It's a lot of ESL kind of mistakes embedded in what sounds like fluent native-like English. So you should become familiar with what when we talk about Gen 1.5, what does that phrase mean? Who are these students? Okay, and if you're ever going to teach, say, freshman composition, and you're in a state or a region that has a large, what we might call ESL population, you might run into Gen 1.5 students. What do you do with Gen 1.5 students? You can't go back to this is a book, this is a pencil. They're way beyond that. They're having they have errors in their English that nobody has ever pointed out, because when they speak these errors, people can hardly catch them. Actually, it's only when they commit their language to paper that we start to see how pervasive these errors are. So I'll stop with that. Pages 15 and 16, exercise 1.1, exercise 1.17, or is it Gen 1.5. It's a term you should be familiar with and a population you should be aware of.